Hi everyone, this is your EdTech launch partner, Emmy, for another episode of Assessing Effectively in Remote Setup. Again, I am so delighted to be with you this afternoon to be discussing to you assessment of learning and its importance in designing important summative assessments and authentic assessments as we journey online learning. So allow me to go and give you a little bit. Again, my name is Emmy Baylon. I am a junior and senior high school faculty of De La Salle Santiago Zabel School from the Vermosa campus. And again, what we're going to learn for today would be to look into assessment of learning, its roles to the teachers the roles of the teachers in the assessment of learning remotely. And alongside me and my partner will be giving you tips on how to be able to provide effective feedback in giving assessments of learning. So again, as I mentioned, assessment is a vital way for us not only to be able to establish a harmonious, safe, secure learning environment amongst our students, but it is also a way for us to be able to provide a deeper learning path, varied learning path, without the students being compromised of their ability to be given a choice, to be heard, to be given a voice, and at the same time to be given the time to reflect and develop their metacognitive skills as they venture into the teaching learning process in the remote setup. Last meeting, we were able to look into assessment as learning, wherein the goal of assessment as learning is to provide guidance and opportunities for every student so that they could be able to be monitored and critically reflect on their learning and identifying certain steps on how they could be able to have clear grasp of their own learning, wherein each student's thinking about how they learn, what strategies take to be able to support and challenge the way they learn, and other mechanisms that they are able to do to be able to adjust into the learning process are given importance. And at the same time, in assessment as learning, there are a range of methods in different modes that would definitely be used to elicit the metacognitive processes of your students. So last meeting also, we were able to highlight 9 important roles of the teachers in creating a good assessment as learning. Wherein teachers are supposed to be create teachers are supposed to be the model to teach students on how to create self-assessment, on how to be able to really assess themselves. Teachers are also given the guide, are serving as guide for students to develop internal feedback and creating a way to be able to monitor themselves, ways to be able to track their progress as they go through teaching learning process. They're also providing different challenges and opportunities as they go through teaching learning process. And more importantly, they have to be able to secure a safe and secure environment where students are not afraid to receive feedback, but instead are open to feedback so that they could be able to develop 2 important characteristics, which are empathy and grit. That in the process of encountering failures, students are not afraid to face all these challenges at hand and learn from these challenges and learn to also empathize to those people who are facing the same challenges that they're also going into. So that's assessment as learning in the previous meeting. For today, our focus would be on assessment of learning, wherein it refers to the strategies designed to ensure or to confirm that the students are able to demonstrate, know, and that they're able to really meet the curriculum outcomes, the curriculum goals that their programs are offering. And at the same time, we, in a way, are also certifying their proficiency for their readiness to future undertakings. So by giving them assessments and by allowing them to undergo these assessments, we could be able to certify and confirm to the students that we are already providing them achievements of the skills and the knowledge that we taught them in the teaching learning process. And that would also provide pieces of evidence not only to the student, but even to their parents, to other educators, and to students of outside groups, maybe students like their colleagues or their classmates, or even future employers or even other educational institutions, of their readiness to be able to go to the next level or to go to the next chapter of their learning process. So that's assessment of learning. In assessment of learning, we look into how we're able to provide summative assessments, design summative assessments, and authentic assessments that would allow them to prepare themselves for future undertakings in the teaching or in the learning process. So, what are the roles of teachers, according to Dr. Lorna Earle, in creating or preparing students for assessment as learning, or rather, assessment of learning? First, teachers should be able to provide rationale on how to be able to create undertaking in a particular assessment at a particular point in time, so that we could be able to really ensure that there's a targeted or intended learning. Enumerate the processes that would enable them to make it possible to demonstrate whatever competence or skill that they would need to, so that they could be able to confirm to us that they are ready and really able to achieve the knowledge and the skill that we're teaching them. We need also to enumerate the description of the assessment process that they need to be able to undertake, so that they could prepare for these processes. We could be able to also offer and create range of alternative mechanisms, so that the students could be able to reach the same outcomes despite the different learning paths that we're going to be able to offer them. Through this, we could be able to prepare to them certain rubrics that would be utilizing, or that we're going to utilize, so that we could be able to check the benchmarks that we could be able to know or to look into when we grade them. Also, in the long run, we could also utilize their outputs to benchmark public and defensible reference points, so that we could be able to really make judgments if they're really ready to go to the next level. In this case, it's important that we align our assessments on certain curriculum standards, like example, what's prescribed by the national level. In this case, the curricular offerings, the curriculum guide prescribed by the Department of Education, or even the curriculum offerings of your institution. We should also be able to provide transparent approaches to interpretation, meaning we have to be able to get ourselves open as educators to be able to explain to the students how are they able to arrive at that certain grade when we give them their final assessment grade for that specific output that they're able to prepare for. In short, in this case, we need to provide also to them descriptive criticisms, descriptive feedback that would enable them to understand why are they able to reach that kind of a grade. And lastly, we have to also provide certain strategies for the recourse in the event of disagreements about the decision. In short, we need to be able to also be prepared, so that in case the students are not able to understand, and example, parents will be coming to us for certain inquiry, we need to be able to really prepare ourselves to be able to explain to them and give enlightenment to the grades that we were able to render to them, and of course, be open to corrections if there is a need for it to be corrected. In assessment of learning, it is important that we really are able to certify and inform our parents of the importance of student proficiency in terms of the curriculum learning offerings. Why? Because the extent to which the student can apply whatever key concepts you taught them can definitely not only confirm knowledge, but it can also confirm skills, attitudes, and values related to what you taught the students in the learning process. In doing so, in doing assessment of learning, it is important that we also provide students a range of methods that they would be able to use, so that we are not only assessing students in terms of how they perform in the process level, but we could be able to assess them in the final output making itself. So in short, feedback is very important, so that along the way of making the output itself, they're already prepared for it, but we could also provide feedback on the process, the final output itself, so that they could be able to really, really better themselves in making the final output. Hence, assessment of learning should be very accurate, consistent, fair, of judgment based on high quality information. In short, it's highly recommended that we really utilize certain standards. Like example, in our case, we really utilize whatever is prescribed by the national curriculum or the Department of Education, so that we could be able to really ensure that we're targeting the right skill, the right content for that specific process that we're teaching our students. And at the same time, it's important that we really delete or eliminate bias by creating rubrics, so that there is a standard or criteria that we would be able to really ensure that the students are really complying to when they create a certain product to prove their competency or skill. It should also provide a foundation of discussion of placement. In short, it should be able to provide an enlightenment on how the students are really doing in comparison to the students that they're with within the class, within the batch, or even within the entire institution, so that parents or even the school itself, the teacher themselves would be able to know on how to really be able to help the students in reaching their goals, not only for the present, but even for the future. It should be able to report and articulate fairness, accuracy, and at the same time, detailed information that would be utilized for them to be able to take the next steps in the process of student learning. So, in a nutshell, that's assessment of learning. It has to provide an avenue, it has to provide information that would confirm the accuracy of students' preparedness and achievement to be able to go to the next level and to be able to really prepare well for the next level of learning. So, at this point, let's try deepening our knowledge of assessment of learning, particularly on how it is done inside a classroom setting. So, I am very delighted to introduce to you one important person who I think is very contributory to who I am right now. I don't think I would be known in this field that I am into if not for the recognition of this woman. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you one empathetic woman I've ever encountered in my life, Mrs. Nancy de la Vega Resma. Right. So, I'd like to Miss Nancy, are you with us now?
Hello, Miss Emmy.
There you go. There's Miss Nancy. Miss Nancy, good afternoon. Miss Nancy
Hello.
is Miss Nancy was my former superior when I was in De La Salle. Well, I'm still in De La Salle Zobel, but when I was working in the Alabang campus, so she was the former social studies coordinator of the high school team during that time when I entered De La Salle Zobel. She was also my junior high school vice principal for operations. So she was the one guiding us in the way we carry ourselves as good teachers when we carry ourselves as advisors in the classroom. So with the varied experience of Mrs. Resma, both as an administrator, as a teacher, and as a teacher, I am very confident that Mrs. Resma would be able to give us an enlightenment of how it is to be able to experience assessment as learning. So, Ms. Resma, good afternoon.
That is a very generous introduction, Miss Emmy. I
Thank
don't know
you.
if I even deserve all of that.
Yes,
But
Miss.
nonetheless, I'm so thankful that you have invited me. I just hope I would be of significant contribution to your course.
Yes, miss. Malaki ang paniniwala ko sa'yo. Maniwala ka sa akin.
Salamat.
Yes. So for
Okay.
today, as I mentioned a while ago, we will be talking about assessment as learning. Believe it or not, for quite some time, Mrs. Resma has been out of the classroom. But when she came back to the classroom, I am very delighted to see her how she was able to showcase her resilience in adjusting into the norms of the new classroom, particularly when she came back. That was the height of blended learning. Am I correct, Miss Nancy?
Yes, that's very correct, Miss Emmy. I think the last time that I was in the classroom before I took an administrative post was that what was happening in the classroom around that time was siguro yung pinaka high tech na, if I may say, is the use of the
Computer.
multimedia,
Right.
PowerPoint, at
Right.
least know how to use all of those no transitions sa slides, tapos
Right.
yung sound pad. So that was the time when I left the classroom.
Right.
So imagine 13 years yon, Miss Emmy, and a lot has changed since then. Very dramatic yung change that
Right.
has happened in the field of education. And so when I came back, as you mentioned, I barely knew any new no technique. Siguro the only thing that I had with me was the eagerness to go back, kasi
Right.
after some time being in the in an administrative post, it tires you. So parang gusto ko ng bagong energy,
Right.
and I know I can get that from the classroom.
Right. And let's get the ball rolling, Miss Nancy, so that we could be
Yeah,
able to
sure.
impart to our audience, to our Facebook Live audience, our topic for today. So my
Okay.
first question would be: assessment of learning strategizes, as I mentioned a while ago, it strategizes designs to confirm what students know, demonstrate whether or not they were able to meet that in the curriculum outcomes. In remote learning, Miss, how do you lead your students to understand the rationale of a particular assessment you give them?
All right. Okay. So I think as teachers, whether you teach remotely or do a face-to-face interaction with your students, it is important that the objectives of your assessments are clear to them. So since my experience in remote learning is still limited at this point, I will be referring to my previous practices in giving assessments. So to answer the question, I make it a point to give and discuss my course outline at the start of every term, which I think most teachers do. Okay, I also take time to discuss this. Okay, if it needed to, if it needs to a session, just to be able to explain to the students what the course outline is, I do that. Okay,
Right.
so I make it a point to discuss, and then it helps me also to give the students an idea on how I will assess them by informing them of my lesson objectives. So, yung whenever I start a lesson, so as you can see here, I prepared some slides that I took from my own my own lessons. So we call them in De La Salle Sobel as learning targets, or what we call I can statements.
Right.
So these are actually taken from lesson objectives that you usually prepare when you write your lesson plan, your module. But
Right.
what we do here is that we see the importance of having the students understand what is it that you want to target for a specific lesson. So in this way, we try to phrase the lesson objectives in statements that are understood by students. At the level of the students, they would be able to have a clear grasp of what is it that you want to target by the end of the lesson. So this way, they are informed on what targets you want to accomplish with them, and then so it gives me the no you're able to lead them to the direction of where you would like to target, and be able to direct them to the assessment by the end
Right.
of the lesson. Okay,
Right. And
so
I
more or
right.
less.
And I like that strategy, Miss Nancy. And I think what's good about the learning targets identifying the learning targets is that you're already providing them an idea of what's going to be expected at the end of the lesson, and they're already being provided metacognitive strategies on how to be able to reach that assessment by going through the various activities of your lesson. Am I correct po?
Yes. Aside from that, Miss Emmy, more than just, presenting to them at the beginning of the lesson, your I can statements. Ito, I learned this from a good friend. Okay. I think Miss Emmy was also contributory in giving me some ideas on how I can do my assessments better in class. So what I do is that after presenting them the I can statements, of course we do the lesson. By the end of the lesson, we go back to our I can statements.
Right.
And we usually give them sort of parang, if I may say, parang sort of feedbacking on how they did regarding the I can statements. So parang simple lang siya, survey. I can, so sasagot lang sila if yes, I can do this alone. I am confident about this particular lesson, or I need more help. So in that way, that's already an authentic feedback to the teacher whether I should proceed to the lesson or to the next lesson, or do I still do a reteaching.
I like that, Miss. So, given that context, Miss, what strategy do you do to ensure that the students are able to really, that the students are able to clearly understand the outputs you wish them to deliver in a summative or authentic assessment?
Okay. So it has always been part of our procedure in our in our school. Whenever we write our modules, it has always been part of our procedure to introduce to the students the essential question. So for some, siguro they don't see the importance of giving time in discussing this with the student. But for me, I've seen the effectiveness of leading the students to to the essential question. And then every now and then, at certain points of our lesson, we go back to the essential question, okay, and then try to ask them to think about, so far as the lesson is concerned, how are they going to answer the essential question. And then we also introduce we go back also to our enduring understanding, which is actually taken from the DepEd curriculum guide. So I think sa akin, these are effective means of communicating to the students what they are expected to develop throughout the lesson or throughout the unit. So in addition to that, of course, careful scaffolding or simply the logical sequence of activities should be done in order to help them develop the skills that will eventually lead them to do the things on their own. So, yeah. Usually, I give activities. I can ask the essential question in class, or kaya naman I can be extra creative by using applications like I do Flipgrid. But at least if I do not have the time to hear each and every student in class, at least I have, say for instance, Flipgrid, for them to be able to express their understanding of the essential question.
I like that idea, Miss, that strategy of providing them the voice to be able to express their idea and not and allowing them to be able to say what they want to say in their own interpretation. So in a way, assessment of learning, you're also integrating assessment as learning because you are giving as an essential question is really deep scaled learning. So it's a difficult question to answer, but if they're able to express things their way through a technology tool, like example Flipgrid, you are providing them avenues to empower themselves and they're being safe to be able to express their voice in your own class, even in remote classes. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Tama po yun, Miss. Gusto ko yan.
Yes, actually, you'll be surprised, Miss Emmy, when you hear students answer a certain question. You'll be surprised. Ito yung mga bata na usually hindi naman nagsasalita sa class, but given the platform and the opportunity, they would be able to share with you their understanding, and you'll be surprised at how deep their understanding is of the topic.
Right. And I think that's also essential in assessment off learning, that they still feel the comfort that despite the teacher not being present in the class, they're still able to say their ideas clearly, because if they're able to see that idea or that learning clearly, then it's easy for you as a teacher to really gauge, oh, may natutunan nga ito sa klase ko. Right?
Mm.
Tama yun, Miss Nancy. What
Yes.
about in terms of how do you effectively scaffold your authentic assessments so that your students can demonstrate authenticity in their outputs?
As I've mentioned, talagang in our school, siguro, for one, when you start doing the module, talagang you will, you will dread it. First of all, it's so difficult to create a module. But as you do it, you would see the fulfillment because, especially when you're already conducting your classes, it's easier for you to see how your lesson would flow. So in DLSE, we are required to indicate in our modules the what you call the scaffold for transfer. So namely, these are the directed prompt, the open prompt, guided transfer, and then eventually the independent transfer. So I'm just going to give you an example because there may be a lot of ways I can share with you the things that I do in the class, but at least for this particular session, allow me to share some of the things that I do. So, for example, for a direct prompt, since I teach understanding culture, society, and politics, and I would like them to be able to do what do you call this a skill by the end of the unit. So I lead them to the direct prompt. Like for instance, this is where usually the students are led to learn specific concepts that I think are important for them to build on their understanding, which later on they would use to create or perform something. So in other words, this is where you demonstrate to them how to do something.
Right.
So parang ano lang to, parang you are serving as a guide to the students. So example, what is their cultural heritage? Or what is cultural heritage and what are the different forms of cultural heritage? Kasi that's one of the main points of discussion in UCSP. So here, we practice learning the concepts by doing discussion. Of course, that's always an important part of any lesson. And then, of course, doing interactive quizzes, parang you drill them on the concepts until such time that they're very familiar with the concepts already.
Tama.
So sa akin, that's how I do my direct prompt. Tapos
Right.
yung open prompt naman, Miss Emmy, is that this is where after watching video clips related to the concept of culture, students may be led to work in groups to discuss questions like how can young people like me contribute further to the preservation of cultural heritage of the cultural heritage of my country. Kasi you started with the concepts of culture, cultural heritage, things like
Right.
that. Then you try to give them more parang chance for them to process how far do they know about the state of the cultural heritage of their own country or what
Right.
makes culture unique. Yeah. So in fact, sometimes we make use of, di ba, mga bata mahilig sila sa mga nila, my story, Insta IG
Right.
story, sabi mo.
Right.
So I made use of some captions na my UCSP story. So by the end of say for instance, a learning discussion, they try to create their own try to create their own story, demonstrating how much do they know about their own culture,
Right.
things like that. And then yung naman, what they call this, yung guided transfer. Here, I ask the students to discuss among themselves particular issues or problems of cultural preservation. Kasi nga, we talked about cultural heritage, diba?
Right.
So the next issue there to us to look into is what are the issues surrounding our cultural heritage. Okay, ano ba yung problema na nakikita nila?
Right.
So as an
Things that would
output,
endanger. Right.
so as an output there, I asked the students to create, say for instance, a storyboard. So parang parang in one way or the other, parang through that group, they are able to do a brainstorming. I think ito magandang gawin ito, things like that. So a storyboard is one clear way of seeing may logical sequence ba yung ano nila, yung ginagawa nila. So, of course, I give parang very clear instructions dapat. Very clear yung instructions. So, as you can see, yung meron kaming ginagamit na template. So, among the things that we want them to think about is that if they're going to create the task by the end of the unit, we ask them already to think about their advocacy.
Right.
Kasi parang sila mismo dapat it should come from them na meron akong advocacy, this is what I want to target. So dito pinapaisip na namin sila ng ano yung gusto nyong heritage that you would like to preserve and what would be your objectives, things like that. So kasama yung sa ano namin.
Right.
And then
so,
yung lastly, of course, yung independent transfer, this is where we ask the students na to create an infomercial that shows their advocacy on how they're going to promote Philippine cultural heritage.
Right.
Yung mga ganon, miss.
So, like here, you will be able to see that from a simple concept building, it became eventually an advocacy. Now it became a deep-scaled learning that from a classroom concept, it was translated into something deeper scale because Miss Nancy allowed them to identify their own culture, allowed them to recognize that I'm part of that culture and I am able to identify to that culture, and eventually allow them to analyze the different issues that our culture are faced with. And because they're able to be aware that there are issues faced by our own culture, they are now challenged as individuals to really create something that would preserve our own culture. So this is an example of how we really scaffold learning, that a simple idea now will be gradually translated into something that is meaningful, something that would be authentic, and that would allow students to solve and contribute to real life problems in their own capacity. Right? Tama ba ako, Miss Nancy?
Yes, in fact, Miss Emmy, if I may share, natutuwa ako with how the activity or how the performance task turns out. Minsan yung at the end, after showing that in class, they themselves share how the project has changed them. In fact, I have one class where they even went to the extent of going to the Dumagats and somehow immersing themselves in the culture of the Dumagats. And then, of course, that was when pre-COVID pa to, syempre. Ito lang, actually, lang siya. Yung just before classes were cut short. I had that class, and then they shared to me na this is the culture of the Dumagats, which at this point are being are posed with the problem of say extinction because of the problem in yung the Kaliwa Dam.
Right.
Pupunta na sila hanggang doon sa extent na yon, and I was so amazed with the sharing that they had, how much they appreciated yung indigenous culture, and so they wanted to do something about that in order for them to help in the preservation of that culture.
Right. And notice how Mrs. Resma was able to design it from a simple interactive quiz. It became a simulated advocacy using social media, maybe not necessarily posted. Am I correct po, Miss? Not necessarily posted, of course, because of some data privacy issue, but you're already providing them avenue to be able to really do a little bit of digital citizenship. And you're already providing them an avenue to do digital storytelling by creating storyboard. That's a skill right now that a lot of people should know or should be ready, particularly in this time of multimedia. Creating digital stories that are relevant would definitely be a good practice, which was eventually translated into a short documentary about culture. And this is a good highlight, a good way of showing how we can integrate technology integrate the use of technology in remote setup. That even as simple as this, you could be able to really lead your students into a deeper scaled learning. So yun po. Miss, allow me to go to segue to the next lesson. Say time is not on your side po, Miss. How do you provide alternatives to your students so that they would still be able to deliver uncompromised learning outcomes?
Okay. So actually, given the new setup where we have to limit our synchronous meetings, with students in Zobel, in Lasal, we started as early as July 6. So parang
Right.
in that case, we can already more or less say what is it that we are experiencing. So we have a very limited synchronous meeting in order
Right.
to still make sure that the screen time of the students are not will not abuse their bodies, yung eyes nila, and so that
Right.
so and so forth. So time will always be a problem actually, whether or not we are in a setup like this, di ba? Lagi naman tayong may mga activities sa school, but open communication, I think, with students is always a key in providing guidance and assistance to our students. So in my classes, I give them this sabi ko, I think tatandaan nyo, we will borrow this from a famous brand of medicine, yung huwag mahihiyang magtanong. Okay, yan yung
Right.
tagline namin.
Right.
So,
Like sa
pag
right med, pwede
parang
magtanong.
promotion ng right med. Sabi ko, ano yung sinasabi ng right med? So, yung mga bata mangingiti sila, is huwag mahihiyang magtanong.
Lang magtanong.
Precisely. But I do that because I am keen on knowing what is it that they would like to ask. Kasi minsan pag hindi natin pin-provide yung opportunity for them, the room for them to ask questions, we might end up being frustrated with their outputs.
Right.
So, pag nagbigay ako ng if I give a work for them, I would always entertain questions. It's just that you give them time. Halimbawa, siguro by this pag ganitong oras na ng gabi, wala nang text o kaya
Tama,
magme-message kasi
Miss.
limited to a certain
Right.
Para
You provide them also. Tama, Miss. Parang you provide them po the parameters, right? Kasi syempre you have other things to do also.
sabi ko sa kanila, kailangan ko rin ng beauty rest.
Tama, tama. Tama.
So, anyway, going back to the question. So, yun nga, I give them the chance. Tapos, they can message me. They can do hangout, email, things like that. Whatever it is whatever is convenient for me. Okay, so,
Right.
at saka also, kung time is not on my side, I'm very thankful that in today's education, we have a lot of online applications that we can use to or utilize in order to help students to still accomplish the expected outputs. So
Right.
ako, a specific example, yun nga, yung flip grid, I made use of that. Very useful sa akin yan. Kasi towards itong March, di ba, when classes were abruptly canceled, there were some students who still needed to present in class. About we required them kasi to come up with yung news reporting namin, it's with the twist. They come up with they choose an issue that they like, and they should be able to critique. Okay, so since that was not possible in a face-to-face interaction, I had to give them instructions on how they can do it using Flipgrid. And true enough, they were able to do it kahit gabi. Nagsasubmit sila. So at least that did not stop them from not being able to deliver.
Right. That sabi nga nila, kung may gusto, may paraan. Tama po ba? Right.
Tama.
Kung may gusto, may paraan. Na hindi ibig sabihin we cannot conduct face-to-face instruction. The road to learning will stop. If I may quote our own department secretary, Department Secretary Mrs. Leonor Briones, it doesn't mean that pandemic is here, everything will stop. Learning should go on, right? Despite the pandemic or the whatever situation that we're all into, right? So, tama yung sinabi ni Miss Nancy na it's a good opportunity for us to be able to utilize technology because the kids are digital natives, right, Miss Nancy? Yung mga kagaya natin, Miss, yung mga kagaya nating edad natin, itong tawag sa atin, digital migrant, tayo yung nag-a-adjust sa kanila, right? But if you offer them that opportunity, I'm sure it's just a breeze for them to to utilize the practice of the technology. Mas magaling pa nga sila minsan sa technology from us, diba? Right.
Precisely, Miss Emmy. Minsan nagpapaturo pa ako, and then they would say, Miss, I think you should do this, you should use it this way, o kaya gawin mo to, things like that. So I
Right.
get a lot of tips from my students.
Right. Tama si Miss Nancy. But again, our role as teacher is important that we are the ones providing them that direction. At the end of the day, it's the pedagogy that's really important above the technology. The students can breeze through the technology, but if they don't know the instruction and it's not clear to them what they're supposed to do, that technology will not provide the right information to really assure that they really confirm that they really learned something in your class. Tama ba ako, Miss?
Yes, precisely, Miss Emmy.
Right. Right. Miss, I'll segue to the next question. Of course, summative assessment and authentic assessment may be sometimes biased. Tama po ba? So, how do you ensure that there is accuracy, fairness, and transparency in providing grades to the students? How do you facilitate feedback?
Whenever we give summative or authentic assessments, okay, one great way of eliminating biases, I think, is to use rubrics. Okay, so we've proven that very effective. At the beginning of an assessment, students should already know how they will be graded. So it will also help if you also provide feedback on why their score is so and so. So it will be not be difficult for students to understand why they not get a perfect grade, or if you were clear in pointing out what was missing in their work. So while this is a bit tedious, I think it pays in the end. So parang di ba meron naman tayong specific standards in the rubric. So we can use those to point out what makes this work not reach the standard. So like that. So mas madali.
Tama po, tama si Miss Nancy. Kung napansin niyo po how tedious Miss Nancy would give a feedback, right? I agree with Miss Nancy. Minsan nakakapagod po talagang mag-type ng feedback, right? Lalong-lalo na kung ang dami niyong gustong sabihin. But come to think of it, the students appreciate it that you're really providing them a lot of how are they able to really be guided well on how you saw the feedback or how you saw the output in terms of the standard you prescribe to everybody, right? And this would really lessen actually the questions kasi na-explain nyo ng lahat. 'Di ba? Mababawasan yung pupunta sa inyo kapag na-explain nyo thoroughly sa kanila na ito yung maaaring things that they're good at and things that they lack for that specific activity. Tama po ba, Miss?
Yeah, so tama, Miss Emmy. But, sabi ko nga, it takes a while to check. Nakakahiya din hindi magbasa, first of all. When you give a work to the students, make sure that you try your best to read. Para at least alam nila na, Miss, did you read my work? Di ba nakakahiya sumagot ng hindi? Kahit nga yung flip grid, Miss Emmy, kahit lang yan, 2-liners, 3-liners, I would make it a point to give feedback to the students on how they did in that particular video output.
Right.
So, yun lang.
Tama, Miss. Dapat pinanood mo, binigyan mo ng effort kasi minsan yung mga bata nagtatanong talaga sila. Kagaya ng sabi ni Miss Nancy, huwag mahihiyang magtanong. Siyempre, na-create nyo na yung na-create na yung environment na yon so the students feel safe and secure that my teacher would be answering my question, na hindi sila nahihiya na yung teacher ko sasagutin niya ako, and they have that certainty that my teacher will be honest to me when you give them feedback, right? So kailangan nandun yung honesty natin, hindi tayo nang i-etchos. Di ba tayo mga Pilipino minsan sa pagnanais nating mapabilis yung trabaho natin, minsan kung ano-ano na lang yung mga sinasabi natin. So, pero kung binigyan natin ng oras at panahon yung activity, if we're able to give the right amount of time in checking their activity or their works, I'm sure we will be giving the fair feedback to them. Am I making sense, Miss?
Of course, ikaw pa ba?
Ayun. Miss, mag-i-inject ako ng question from our FB live audience, right? Galing ito kay Sir Jude Red, right? Miss, ang haba ng sinabi niya, di ba parang nobela, pero i-synthesize ko na lang, Miss. You, Miss, being a teacher, how well are you able to transition from face-to-face to learning digitally with your students being assessed whether in formative, summative, or in authentic assessments?
All right, sige. Let me just try to remember all of those as best as I can.
Opo.
How did I transition? First of all, in fact, sir, if I may share with you, I barely had 2 months to really prepare kasi we usually are what you call the culmination of our work from a previous position usually terminates by the half of May. Oo, yon, to mid-May. Tapos we take on right away we take on the new task, the new position. So in my case, May 16 halimbawa ako nag-end, May 17 the following day teacher na ako. But while I was, of course, I already anticipated somehow that would happen because first of all, the decision was not made instantly naman. Meron na akong, kumbaga, sinasite ko na yung sarili ko na I have to prepare. But really, yung physical preparation took mga 2 months lang siguro, Miss. Kasi we had to start June, right? So, while that was happening, I was already, parang attending sessions. We have the in-service. And on that side, I asked a lot of my co-teachers, Miss Emmy is included. Maraming beses ko yung kinukulit. Miss Emmy, paano ba't ginagawa to? Ang unang-una ko lang po munang natutunan at kailangan kong natutunan around time is how to create a Google Classroom and how to navigate.
A learning management system, Miss. Yes, a learning management system.
Yes, because at that time, we were already, parang yun na nga, as Miss Emmy said, we were transitioning already or we transitioned slowly to the next generation blended. And so all of us are required to come up and use an LMS. So, dahil yun yung requirement, I had to do it. I mean, wala naman din akong choice. Well, I have a choice. It's either I take it positively or negatively. Pero sa akin, as I said, I took it with parang with extra encouragement, a push. Parang something that revitalized the teacher in me. So, hindi nyo man po ninyo paniwalaan, pero I was really excited. Pero hindi po siya hassle-free to begin with. I had to stay late nights in order for me to plan for my lesson, confer with my co-teachers, the ones that I'll be working with in the level. Then slowly but surely, I had to learn how to craft online assessments, how to use Google Form. Unti-unti lang po. But yung mga slow but painstaking stages that I had to go through, they paid off in the end. Yun po. Malaking bagay po yung yung collaboration with your co-teachers. I had a very supportive community in the first place. So alam nila na that I've been away from the classroom for so long. And so pag magtatanong po ako sa mga younger teachers, they're very accommodating. Miss, ganitong gawin mo. They take time. Yun po ang maganda sa De La Salle Sobel, if I may boast about it, because that's one thing that I like in our community. It's a familial community, very supportive. If there's anything that we do well, we share it with others. So, yun po yung amin. I think you have to have that in your respective communities.
Tama yung, I really would like to agree with what Mrs. Resma mentioned, that it's important that aside from the delight of transitioning back to your classroom, that personal zeal to really go back and do the work and push really yourself to your limits. It's important to have collaboration with the people you're working with. Collaboration is not just a skill that we give to the students. It's not just a 21st century skill for our students. It's also a 21st century skill for us teachers, because at the end of the day, no man is an island, right? We have to be able to really ensure that we could be able to learn from others' practice. And at the end of the day, whether unknowingly or knowingly, some people are learning also from us. I've learned a lot from Mrs. Resma. I don't think I would be able to hold on to being an administrator if not for the guidance of Mrs. Resma. I was in the admin post for quite some time, but Mrs. Resma is a good mentor. I always go to her office and she really listens well to me. And I think that was one thing I was able to carry on when I came back to the classroom. The transition wasn't really difficult because, again, we have a team that's very collaborative and very accepting, again, because we feel that the environment is really safe and secure. So I always would want to emphasize that a safe and secure environment is not only for your students, it's also for you teachers, right? Because the kind of work that you render would also depend on the kind of learning environment that you're working into, right, Miss Nancy?
Yes, opo, oo.
Right.
We
So,
hold, if I may add to that, Miss Emmy, no, it's also important for us to have what you call professional learning communities or
right,
PLC.
right,
Regular, you meet, tapos you talk about how you would conduct a session. As I've said, we also do peer observation,
opo,
just to help us get
right,
through a certain, say, for instance, what worked well for this teacher might work for me also. So I might as well,
right.
learn from her. Ganon.
Right. So we call that walkthroughs, right? So
Yeah.
we could be able to really work with each other because, again, as I mentioned, I unknowingly or knowingly, you are also teaching them something, and in one way or another, you might also be learning something from other teachers. Miss, meron pa akong isang question, i-integrate ko na lang. Parehas dito from Regine Hoveliano and Victor Samaniego. Miss, for you, what is the characteristic of a best rubric? And how do you really ensure that you're able to provide feedback? Example for the students that you handle. Normally, di ba, mga 35 to 40, tama po ba? So how do you ensure that you're able to really provide feedback to all of them?
Quite difficult. Siguro yung mga rubrics, well, for one, ang sabi niya kanina, what is the best characteristic of a rubric? First
Right,
of all, you have to find out muna what is it that you are requiring for your students to do. So siguro from there, you try to craft. Kasi I think ang naging training sa amin is for us to look into ano ba yung hinihingi ng ano mo, ng assessment mo.
right,
So you begin with that and then try to think of siguro descriptives that would spell out how you would be assessing the student. So
right,
as I remember dun sa mga trainings natin, Miss Emmy, di ba? When you craft a rubric, you begin with what is acceptable muna.
right, right,
Parang usual mistake is we already think of the excellent yung kung
right,
analytic yan, di ba?
right,
Mag-isip ka na doon sa excellent na part. Pero hindi pala dapat ganun. You start with something that is acceptable. Ano yung pinaka
within the
should I
norm.
say, within the norm. Tapos saka ka na mag-isip ng ano yung beyond what is expected. Yun yung gagawan mo. So
Yeah,
how do you provide feedback? Well, as I think based on what I've shown you, if you are asking the students to create, say, for instance, an essay, a position paper, you really take time in, finding out based on your rubric kung how they were able to produce yung kanilang output.
right.
Difficult, yes, it is difficult. Hindi naman madali ang pagtuturo natin in the first place.
Pero lalaanan talaga ng oras. Tama po ba, May?
Yes, hindi
Right.
pwedeng haphazard lang yung ginagawa natin.
Right. Parang pag-ibig yan, it takes time. Tama po yan. All right. Correct. Moving further, how do you ensure, Miss, that your assessments are aligned with your learning targets and goals?
Okay, ito, I'm sure you're familiar with the UBD framework. Diba?
Right.
Begin with the end in mind, laging sinasabi
Tama po.
sa atin, di ba? So
Opo.
ako, I remember very well Dr. Mike Rapatan, for the longest time, he's our curriculum consultant. And he would always say, and this is what I remember well, in his sessions. When you think about the end in mind, it's like ang kanyang metaphor na ginamit is when you want to cook something, say, yung favorite mong sinigang, ako I can relate well to that because I know how to cook. Well, of
Right.
course, I would like to believe I know I am a good cook.
Yes.
Okay. So, you think about what kind of taste would you like to arrive at? So
Right.
you don't think about ano yung procedure, yung ang tawag dito, dapat ito muna, hiwain mo muna. Yung munang lasa muna. Kasi yun yung magiging standard mo. Eh. So just like in the classroom, you think about what is it that you want your students to be able to produce by the end of your module. Okay? So again, we go back to our standards. So, maganda nga ngayon na meron na tayong mga ganyan, di ba? Yung content standard, meron na tayong performance standard. So, meron na tayong pinagbabasihan nung kung ano yung, what is it that we would be expecting our students to learn by the end. In Lasal, we also include what we call yung Lasalian, what do you call that? Guiding principle. We use that, Miss Annie, right?
Core
Lasalian guiding
values, right?
Kasi as a school, we have our own mission. So we try to incorporate also our mission.
Right.
So that's how we do it. And then from time to time, we try to check on the essential question, the enduring understanding. So things like all of this are taken into consideration whenever we create our assessment. So that's our gauge of being able to know if we're targeting the learning goals.
Right. So, Miss, kung halimbawa, Miss, your design, do you normally benchmark it with, example, the designs of other teachers, like let's say public school teachers? Do you have that opportunity to really gauge your curriculum design with the designs done by other teachers as well?
I think it's important also, Miss Emmy, kasi first of all, we're using one and the same performance
Right, the curriculum guide.
Standard. So, ibig sabihin, whether you're teaching in the public school or in the private school, you are looking at the same standards. And students will be engaged by those standards. So ako, good thing we have a lot of educators, especially in the public school, who are also sharing their resources online. So nakikita mo, this is how they're doing it. So maybe I can also, this is how I should be directing my lessons too. So, nakakatulong yun ng malaki. And then, of course, pwede mo na yung dagdagan, pwede mo na yung i-enhance based doon sa standards ng sarili mong institution.
Tama.
So, I think it's important.
Right. Tama yun. You have to be able to really ensure that you're rocking the same boat. Because at the end of the day, it's a national standard. Remember, in assessment of learning, it is supposed to be a standardized way of checking the students if they're really within or below or above the norms. That's correct. So, Miss, how do you handle yung mga students na they normally disagree with how you graded them?
Well, hindi naman yan maiiwasan, di ba? There would always be some students who might, feel that they should get more than what you have given them. Pero I think it's important na, sabi ko nga, at the very onset, clear to them how you're going to assess them and how you're going to grade them. So far in the years that I've been in, so far ito since I came back to the classroom, wala pa naman talagang nag-question ng todo, no? Not really na, siguro thankful ako because it's clear to them how they'll be assessed. But there was this student din, pare naman, itong huli ko lang na, Miss, I would like to know why I got this kasi ganyan. So I had to explain to her, anak, ito kasi yun. No? So I gave her screenshots of the computation. Kasi sa atin, di ba, that's computer generated. So we input the scores. There's a system for that.
Information.
I had to share to her. Tapos I had to explain to her one by one. Oh, this is how this is done. Ito yon. So right from the beginning, I discussed with them the grading system.
Right.
So how is the grade broken down into this particular sets? Tapos I showed her, ito yung mga screenshots ng mga submission mo, ganito, ganyan. So sabi ko, nanghihingi kasi siya ng actually ng favor. Kasi nga parang dahil dun sa score niya, parang hindi siya makakaabot dun sa tina-target niyang ano. So sabi ko sa kanya, while I would like to do that, it will not be, of course, fair to the others. Kasi you know naman that right from the start, I've been reminding you to submit all your work. So ganun lang. Actually, alam mo, walang tinanggap ng bata kasi even if that meant removing her from the roster of honor from the honor roll ika nga. Pero she accepted it because she knew that I was able to pinpoint to her the exact reasons why her grade is like that. So I think as teachers we should be very open to our students. In fact, sabi ko kanila, kung meron kayong questions, if you show this to your parents, ako ang ginagawa ko, Miss Emmy, usually, before the scores are released, I give them already, hindi ko naman binibigay yung exact grade, but more or less, inaano ko sa kanila, you give me your expected grade, then I'll tell you kung plus or minus. Tapos, nagkakaroon na sila ng pag nakita nila, ay, miss, mas mataas pa pala kesa dun sa ina-expect ko. I mean, more, because of that system, parang mas naging sila, yung parang kampante sila. And so, during PTCs, normally, I would not have any parents questioning the grade that their children got. So, mas kasi, klaro siya. So, it helps.
Buti na lang nasagot na ni Miss Nancy na because of being able to explain the grades well, it becomes now more collaborative with the parents kasi the students are now able to explain their side of the story to their parents. That's correct.
Yes.
Right. And it becomes now a more collaborative effort to the parents. Am I correct po, Miss?
Opo. Actually, Miss Emmy, talagang ako, in fact, sa Google Classroom kasi there's also, di ba, parang you have the
management system
avenue where you can invite parents. So I tell my students, please let your parents enroll in the Google Classroom so that they would know, they would be seeing what is happening. Para alam din nila, sila magre-remind sa inyo pag di pa kayo nagsasubmit.
Right. So tama, Miss. So the learning management system becomes an avenue where the parents can also really reach out to you for information, not only regarding grades, but even certain ways on how to improve the way their children are performing in your class. Tama po ba?
Yes. Actually, Miss Emmy, going back to parent collaboration, if I may add this, when I ask my students to do the performance task, and that would require, halimbawa, kasi yung ibang bata, excited sila, we're going to this place, and that, teka, sabi ko, wait lang. I have a letter to your parents. I make sure that the parents are informed well of what the performance task is and what would it require. And then I explain there already that there's no need for your, it's not really a necessity for your kids to go out in order to do this activity. Now, not unless you are going to accompany them. So in that sense, nawawala sa akin yung responsibility na ako yung magbabantay sa mga anak nila in conducting the performance task. Kasi right from the start, informed sila. So I have a letter. I require a reply slip to be submitted. And it worked for me so far. Wala ko naging problema or questions.
Miss, my last two questions coming from our audience. Galing ito, Miss Kai Doreen Tersol, right? Miss, ang tanong niya tungkol ito, Miss, sa research. Miss, of course, may mga data din po kayong nakukuha sa inyong mga classes. So, what suggestion can you give regarding giving feedback and assessment utilizing research data?
Okay. Siguro, although I haven't done any research yet regarding my own practice, how I do it in my own classes, but maybe we can look at yung effectiveness ng giving feedback in terms of vis-a-vis student scores or performance. Siguro pwede yun. Ano ba, nakakatulong ba yung pagbibigay ng feedback? Effective ba siya in ensuring that the students are getting good scores? Things like that. Siguro that's what I can think of as of now, Miss.
Right. Ako, when I give feedback, I always provide avenues not only for individual feedback, pwede ding peer feedback. So,
yes.
Right. So, lalong-lalo na karaniwan ng mga activities namin sa school ay mostly peer work, right? Or
Yes.
group work, right? At yun doon
Yes,
nagsisignal, right? Tama po ba ako, Miss Nancy?
Oo, ako, I also do that, Miss Emmy, yung aside from the feedback that the rubric that I give to them, meron din silang yung peer feedback na yung amongst themselves, how did they do the work? Tapos, how would they rate also one another? So, nakakatulong yun. Oo. Nagiging objective.
Right. Providing peer feedback is a revelation. It can tilt the boat, right? Normally for me.
Malalaman mo kung sino yung malalaman mo kung when you introduce to them, this is a peer evaluation na ganyan. Malalaman mo, our leader was not always present whenever we had meetings.
Right, because the student, right, because you provided an avenue, you provided a safe and secure environment for students to be honest about giving feedback. It can tilt the boat, and then the students would be able to really tell how much they were able to contribute and how others are able to contribute to the final output. Right? So, yun makalaga po yun. So, individual feedback, peer feedback, and even self-feedback. Right? So, hindi lamang ito tungkol dun sa final grade. Kailangan pati yung the way they process, the way they learn. Yung kaninang umpisa ni Miss Nancy, when she showed to you learning targets, na nagtatanong siya, is this clear? Do you still need help understanding? Or this is vague? So, mahalaga yung nagtatanong kayo sa mga bata para nang sa gayon, those feedback provided by the students can aid you. Ito, mukhang kailangan ko pa itong tutukan, mukhang hindi pa ito malinaw sa kanila. Kailangan kong i-clarify itong part na to kasi hazy. Or, kailangan kong i-reteach kasi hindi ko, pag nagbigay ako ng assessment dito sa mga batang ito, kung hazy to, babagsak tong mga to for sure. So, right. So, self-feedback is essential for you to be able to transition before to assessment of learning to your final summative assessment, mag-conduct self-feedback. Kasi magiging honest naman yung mga bata doon sa self-feedback nila. Right. So, Miss, any last words from a digital migrant na transition now that you're really experiencing ODL at its finest? What tips can you provide our teachers who are really preparing themselves to breeze through ODL or distance learning or remote learning?
Siguro yung aking parang naging should mantra. I say mantra, yung nakita ko kay Stats 2018, yun ginagamit ko yun talaga, yung reinvent yourself and thrive, yung never stop learning ang sabi doon, reinvent yourself and thrive. So parang naging as you said, mantra. Parang it became clearer to me na there's a need for us, even if you don't make your age as an excuse from not learning new things, new innovations in technology and in education. The more that you have to learn this and immerse yourself, wag tayong matatakot, kahit na sabi ko nga paunti-unti yung mga seminars na ina-attendan natin. I'm sure a lot of you has attended seminars during the lockdown, and nakatulong ng marami yun. In fact, I gained one or two things that I am now using in class na malaking bagay na nakikita ng mga bata that you're also honing your own skills as a teacher. So right. Sa akin, never stop learning. Don't be afraid to learn.
Right. I like that. I'd like that as a very good way to close this discussion, a good way to be able to close this course. Never stop thriving. I like the word, because at the end of the day, whatever circumstance we will be the model of our own class. We will be the queens and the kings of our classroom. The way we thrive would also be the way our students would see us thriving or designing our own classroom. Again, Miss Nancy Resma, thank you very much. Every day, whenever I speak to you, I learn a lot from you. Thank you very much. And I hope, ladies and gentlemen, you learn a lot from Miss Nancy Resma as she shared herself and her experience in assessment of learning. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Miss Emmy. Mine is the pleasure, really.
Right. Thank you for joining us today. I hope that we would be able to see more next time in some other way, in some other manner. And I hope that you're able to
Sorry,
learn more, right? So from our discussion today. Please do not forget to, if you want, if you missed other sessions about assessment of, for, and as learning, again, go to Schoology, our course. It's posted on the Rex Bookstore page. Please, all recordings are there. If you miss them, you just have to play all these recordings. Just go there and try learning more. Again, thank you everyone. Have a pleasant lunch and good afternoon. Bye everybody.